from pathogenic issues such as, hop latent. You've been working in this silo. Everybody else has been sharing cuts and spreading the viroids around, and there's new viruses coming, by the way. So by having like that old stock that's been just in isolation, basically, is a massive advantage to what is going on in Cali.
Completely uncontaminated by cookies as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing.
Free of all cookie contamination.
Dude, like we call them glitter cookies because they look great. They don't really get you off, and they're just kind of like me. And weed has become like it's better than ever, but it's also more boring than ever. So
Boring, that's the
there's
word.
yeah. So it's like kind of like just doesn't have that long effect. Like it's not because I've been smoking weed for 30 years, but the weed that's available commercially does not get me nearly as high for as long as the stuff I smoked when I was younger. So we're very excited to bring back some of these hazes that, yeah, they might flower a little longer, and yeah, they might take a little bit more care when trimming, but you get a much longer and stronger effect from them, and that's why there's a helicopter going over. That's why we're consuming cannabis, right? It's for the effect. So
exactly.
I'm hoping that we can move away from this THC driven marketplace. Everybody in the commercial sector talks about it, but the distribution boards and the consumers can't get away from it. So yeah, and I think if consumers knew just how fraudulent the lab analyses are in every jurisdiction, like up here in Canada, there's one lab that Health Canada has reviewed now because they're providing analysis that are like 10 to 15% higher than what the other labs, you know, actually validated labs are producing. So it's totally lies, and it's not, and they're trying to gain market share. They're a group in Montreal. They're trying to gain market share. They're issuing these huge COAs.
That was exactly what the last episode of this podcast was about. If anybody's not listened to it, when we had Medman on with his friend Trent, I forget Trent's surname, but yeah, he had done some great work in exposing the absolutely fraudulent lab results that they're putting out there and how it's all paid for, and the labs that are giving true results are going out of business because people won't go to them. They want to go to the ones that they know that will give the higher result. And I think I asked you what was his largest discrepancy between what was quoted and what was the truth, because he was getting stuff tested like legitimately, and it was like higher than what you just said, bro. It was like 20, I believe it's like 25%, something like that.
Yeah,
It's
it was
crazy.
something disgusting, like 8% put up.
No, way higher than 8%. Way higher.
No, I'm saying that was the original. Like after the third party test came out, it was actually 8%, and it was being put out for a crazy number. He also said that High Times in New York was pushing something that was 50%.
Yeah.
It's all bullshit. I mean, there's two elements to it. Number one is like sampling methodology. So are you grabbing from the bottom of the dry bag where there's tons of keef, selecting the nicest top and then rubbing it in keef, and then taking an extra pinch of keef and putting it in the bag and shipping it to the lab? They're not sorting it when they get it, right? When the lab receives it, they just mill it all and test it. So sampling methodology is number one, and then the assay that's being run and how the equipment is calibrated, and is it a validated method? In most cases, these shisty labs, they know how to fudge the numbers, and they're just doing that as their general practice. When I was working in California, it was about $1,000 per point of THC. That's literally what this famous lab was changing. Yeah, man, you want a 30 pointer? 30 G's, yo. And groups are doing that because when you got 100 pack and you can get a 30 point COA, you're going to get top shelf placement as long as it looks good. And that 30 G's is just going to be absorbed into your costs. And when you're selling it for, a couple G's a kilo, and you got 100 kilos, breaking off 30 grand, they don't give a fuck. It guarantees distribution, right? So that is, so back to this whole effect element. What's happened is with these fraudulent COAs, other growers I know have bought product and like, what is it? 32 points? Bullshit. And they open it up and it looks like dog shit. And then they send that sample to the lab and it comes back at 15%. So if consumers knew just how skewed the numbers were, maybe they wouldn't be the sole deciding factor of their choices, right? Like if you're solely deciding your decision on the number on the bottle, but the number's not accurate, then why is that your deciding factor? I like smell and taste and effect more than anything, and it usually correlates with good looks, right? Like it's going to be nice density and good level of trichomes visible, but generally it's like smell, taste, and effect, and that comes in that order. So and then repurchase, right? Like there's no brand loyalty in weed generally, because lots of consumers, variety is the spice of life, but the producers have been so inconsistent that it's very tough to be brand loyal. So until we get like some better analysis that's actually accurate and some more consistent crops into market, it's a gong show. And we're working really hard to produce consistent products, even from seed, consistent products, so that we have like a follow through with our consumers. And yeah, that's an ongoing concern. And that's outside of the scope of grower too, by the way. Like when you're a grower, you all of a sudden become interfacing with sales and marketing and all of that, because you're the one that's ultimately responsible for what's going on the plate. So yeah, it's a really huge challenge in the legal space. Back in the day, it didn't matter. Just what did it smell like, right? Looks and smell. Look at the pack. They would be graded based on looks and smell. Sometimes they would burn one to make sure it wasn't like gnarly, but generally the packs just moved based on look and smell. And now as we've evolved into the legal space with the regulators involved and with the analysis involved, it's really kind of a shame, because you have some amazing plants that might test at 18% and 4 or 5% terpenes, and they get you high for like 4 or 5 hours, but they're not commercially viable because the liquor board won't list them. Just so
it's something I mention virtually every episode, that something needs major re-education. It's just absolute bullshit that high THC means anything, and what it generally does mean is boredom in effects.
Well, remember when I mentioned that like the first crops that were dropped at the place that I'm at were lower quality and it tarnished the brand? It's safe to say that in Canada, just in general, the first crops that were grown by like the first 9 companies, none of them were very good. And because the crops were struggling and they weren't like that healthy, they had lower THC, 15 to 18%. So the consumer has been kind of like put off by lower T because they see that as just lower quality in general, because the first crop sucked, right? So that's it's not correlated exactly, but there's definitely some re-education happening. Yeah, totally. And just the shitty growers growing in big brand new facilities with a bunch of Bay Street business dicks surrounding them, and they didn't really have an eye for quality. They were, machine trimming everything wet and then running it through a microwave vacuum oven. Wow. Dude, are you guys familiar with microwave vacuum ovens?
Wait, so what were they smoking? Like hay? What was the end product? Hay? Because that's what it sounds like.
The vacuum ovens, it's a technology that's used for drying food primarily. There's a product called Moon cheese that's made with it. It's a dry, crusty cheese. They're great. It's kind of like a pop rock sort of thing. It's a really fun, shelf-stable cheese product. That's all natural. It's just cheese. It's not a bunch of like corn bullshit or whatever. So the technology is it's a large pressure vessel that has a magnetron inside, which is basically a microwave element. And the pressure vessel is run at a vacuum so that water boils at a lower temperature. So you're able to, and some of them are just like a batch process, and some of them have a conveyance with 2 doors. So it's got like an airlock. So the trays move in, the airlock closes, it depressurizes, it moves into the vacuum or into the microwave area, it dries the product, and then it moves into a depressurization area, and then it moves out. So it's basically a machine for drying products in a throughput. It's different technology than air drying. It's microwave, and it just absolutely nukes the weed. It boils off the terpenes. It distills the terpenes off into a holy water. But you're able to make dry weed inside of 45 minutes and go from fresh to basically consumer packaged all in one line. So as the big commercial producers all signed up for it, man. The big greenhouse that Canopy had in Delta, the one that burned down, apparently, I heard this through the grapevine, apparently somebody turned on the microwave vacuum oven as part of the tour, left it on, and it caused a fire in the the area of the building was full of cardboard for packaging, burned that greenhouse down. So that is just one example. Other companies have been using it for years and years and years, and nobody wants their weed, so they finally switched to like hang and hand trimmed or machine trimmed dry at least. But yeah, the first big companies, they were all microwave vacuuming ovening their weed because they had so much of it. They thought it was the only way. But I mean, having tonnage of weed you can't sell is not a good business plan. Having an amount of weed that you can market and sell through and have a demand and have people fucking line up for is a much better business plan. So
yeah,
it's unbelievable that those are the initial products that hit the market, and everybody in Canada was like, legal weed sucks. You know, the first 2 years of legalization, none of the products were good. There was like one or two brands that had decent weed. It's getting much better, but there's still a sea of mids out there with a couple of decent producers, and the bud tenders don't even know because they haven't worked in weed for 25 years, right? They haven't been exposed to thousands of kilos over like, tens of thousands of kilos over the years of hundreds of varieties, right? They get to see only the weed that they can afford to buy in many cases. And these are minimum wage employees, basically. So they don't buy
exactly
premium weed all week long and see, like, they don't open every jar here. All the jars are sealed with an excise tax stamp on them. So they can't even, they don't often even open them. Some stores have started doing that. They'll open one of them and put it in a clear glass jar like this. And then that will be the last one that they sell, and they keep it on display. But the point is that minimum wage employees can't afford to buy many, many, many different weeds to see them and grade them and make good recommendations. So the recommendations that they make are based on what the sales reps tell them. And the sales reps aren't exactly the most objective and skilled cannabis sommeliers, put it that way.
I tell you, a lot of that shit weeds was getting exported out of Canada to various places, including the UK. So I knew, I knew of somebody who was getting like he had an extensive menu, like maybe a 12 to 15 different things at any one time. They were getting quite large numbers of it, but it was all shit. It was just all shit. And like all of it, except one time he came through with something that was just like so good as well. I was like, oh man, that one Canadian dude who grew one thing right and sent one good thing over to us. I was like so appreciative of him because it was actually like, it was approaching 10/10, but everything else was absolute dog shit.
It's it was that
exported.
that export market turning on really was a lifeline for a handful of big companies. They like I don't like to name names in this case. I know a lot of groups, but like you can't sell your weed domestically because no one wants it, and you have all this inventory. If it tests well enough to export into Israel, that's what they've done. Is they've just opened the pipeline and pumped it all off, and now the situation basically is those export markets, the pipeline of mids is full. And they're like, no more of that. And then they're like, okay, but we want quote unquote craft. So
well, it's ended up in the black market in the UK for sure, some of that shit, because I saw somebody with a lot of it.
Well, and guess what? The big companies, some of their product was leaking out of their supposedly high-tech regulated facilities because I'm exposed to it, right? I know extractors that were like, oh yeah, we're buying fucking big lots from Big Co, and it's just they're backdooring it because you know what? They're fucking failing public companies with huge burn rates, and they got all this inventory, and somebody comes up with them with a great idea that, hey, let's run that through our destruction SOP and backdoor it to some dudes that sell it online. And it's like, I don't think it's as prolific as it could be, but there's definitely some large groups that were clearing their back stock by selling it to the black market, which Health Canada would love to hear about, right? Like the reality is that these highly regulated companies are almost worse than black market growers because we actually had a code of ethics back in the day. We had an ethical responsibility to take care of our friends and the people that we did business with, because if you fucked around, you would, find out about it. And there is a lot more like enforcement of business practices that were like sound back in the day because
it's
you didn't
exactly
want
what
somebody
I
showing
said
up
at the
at your
last
fucking
episode
house.
as well. I said the same thing in the last episode, Jeff. It'd be all so much better if it was essentially no regulation, because after a while it would balance out between regulation of how it used to be, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So the one thing I often say is, like, if you thought black market growers were bad, wait until you see the white collar dudes and what they've done. And there is some insane stories out there of like members of a board of a public company buying a property in Jamaica and then flipping it for like 50 times the value to the company of which they sit on the board for. Like, man, if the shareholders of that company knew that they sold a fucking $2 million property in Jamaica for 100, they'd lose their fucking minds, especially now that they're all tanking and their balance sheets have been depleted. Like, it's and you know, these board members are the ones that are directly profiting from selling properties to themselves. Like, that's not even unethical. That's fucking criminal, man. Like, so, and it's criminal at a way bigger scale than any of us, like, backcountry weed growers were back in the day. Like, yeah, we made some money, but it wasn't like hundreds of millions on the backs of retail investors. It's unbelievable.
Oh man, it's another level.
It's another level, exactly. And that, now that all that has flushed out and stabilized, what we're trying to do is focus on good products, because we still have a huge market demand for what we're doing. You know, weed being legal now means that we're not going to jail for it. And it means we have the opportunity to help a lot of people. Like, people benefit from cannabis more than any other recreational product in the marketplace. Alcohol is killing people every day. Tobacco is even worse. These vapes, all the kids are addicted to, who fucking knows what their lungs are going to be like in 30 years. But cannabis, I've been smoking it for 20 years, 25 years, and I've got great respiratory function. And I used to smoke cigarettes. When I quit smoking cigarettes, my respiratory function improved, and it stayed that way, even though I keep smoking cannabis, right? So it really does no harm, right? And even if you smoke a lot like I do, I find that I'm not nearly as affected by it as other things that are like alcohol ruins me, but cannabis fucking makes me a better partner and father and all that. So yeah, we have a lot of good that we can do by proliferating cannabis and making better quality products available to everyone for a price they can afford. That's also been my mission, right? Like, the whole reason why I started doing this.
Yeah, that's like my intention with, like, somebody in your position be able to pop a whole bunch of those pheno hunters, right? Because you will be able to bring back, like, in one hit, a huge range of effects that people are just nice effects, you know, pleasant, beautiful effects that are like absent in modern cannabis, that people won't have been exposed to the majority of them. It's just going to be fucking awesome. You could, like, change the game out there.
I think I'd down and go to the beach, and in the fall we would turn it back on. But now it's like this year-round thing, big money involved, tons of different stakeholders. There's no more cops, but there's like regulators, right? Which are basically the cops now. So I keep it super compliant. Like, I don't, I grow at home. I grow my 4, as you can see behind me, in my backyard, but I'm not like involved in any legacy market stuff anymore because it's just too much risk factor. And I appreciate that I'm able to make a career out of what used to be my hobby and my passion. Basically, if you can turn your passion into your job and still be passionate about it, that's a pretty good position to be in. And I'm not like making millions of dollars or anything, but I'm supporting my family and I'm able to, you know, tuck a little away for the future. And yeah, I'm pretty happy that legalization has served me well, because many people legalization has not served well because they weren't able to fit into a legal entity for many reasons. Like, the people that gravitated towards weed, most of my friends, like, they didn't like waking up before noon. You know, they can't sit down in a boardroom and convince executives that they've got the wherewithal to run their multi-million-dollar facility, for example. So they don't have the the passion, but also just like the drive to get the work done and put in the hours and do all that. It was easy money before. It's not easy money anymore. It's hard money, but you're making a positive impact on the community and society on the whole. So I think if you have that drive, then and you have a good team and you build that team up. That's the other thing. There's a lot of groups that these growers are like dictators, right? They're like these artists. They have this artist mind, and they're not able to like be compassionate and help build people up and train them and have them take pride in their work. And if you have a team that's willing to like, come in every single day with a smile on their face and do the not always awesome work and, contribute in a positive way, then you are leaps and bounds above where a lot of groups are. And that's often overlooked too. Everybody's got to want to come to work, or guess what? They don't. And working for some asshole, and I'm not perfect. I have my, issues from time to time, but in general, I try to keep it like in my job space, like super positive. And even when things, there's a flood or if there's like, a challenge or some issue, then we got to look at it from a solutions-based perspective, not a blaming and doomsday, the sky is falling perspective, because that's not going to serve anybody in the organization, certainly not the stakeholders and certainly not the consumers. So keep focusing on the consumers, and that's how you win the weed game, right? Just make the best products possible. Don't rush it. Don't rush your drying. Don't rush your ripening. Don't rush your trimming. Just do it all like a nice even pace, and make sure that you preserve those terpenes, because that is the North Star metric, we call it. You focus on the terpenes and everything else falls in line.
Yeah.
It's massively important.
Well, I'm real glad to see that you're doing well personally, man, because all the time I've known you've been super cool, and it's like having one of us in the game. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, man.
So that's really cool. So I'm glad you're personally doing well. I'm glad there's people like you actually in the game. Do you know what I mean?
It's been a challenge. Like there's been a bunch of chads that are kind of like, fucked me over. And the first big company I was with, it wasn't direct. It was just the market condition at the time. The last company I was with, they right. And some of the biggest nurseries in Canada have been shipping rainbow packs. You receive your clones, you start growing them out, and then one's leggy and one's stout, and then they don't have tight enough controls on their propagation system to know that it's only one variety. And that is extremely challenging as a commercial grower.
Yeah.
Cool.
So is there anything else of interest happening in the industry or in Canada that you wanted to mention before we kind of bring it to an end, Jeff? Because I've got to go check on my dog who's downstairs.
Yeah, I got stuff to do too. I mean, I think that it's a hard time right now. It has been for the last couple of years in the space. When 2020, the COVID happened, all those cannabis companies were on the downfall. It's been in the news, and then everything crashed. But the reality is there's more bongs than ever in the country. There's more ashtrays than ever in the country. And the big scale guys have all gone out of business, basically. There's only a couple of large scale operators now, and they, a lot of their gear goes offshore. So there's a big demand to fill, and there will continue to be. Just like the beer industry, there was, consolidation, and in Canada, there was like Labatt's, and there's Molson, and, maybe one other. There's a in Penticton where I live, there's 6 microbreweries, right? And there's not 6 microbreweries because it's something fun to do. It's because they make money. So I think the same thing is going to be true with cannabis, is that once the market stabilizes, it is stabilizing right now, small producers are going to be able to find their niche and service a small market. As long as they don't go too big too fast and they prove their concept, I think that a lot of small growers are going to continue to transition to the legal market. And I see a lot of blue sky, because we're just in the beginning of this journey, right? Like, legal is still new, and they're still figuring it out, and the regulations are changing, and it's still like an evolution. So try not to be too hard on the legal industry, because it is in its infancy, and the legacy industry or the home grow industry is flourishing as well. Like, everybody that wants to can get a medical license and have a operation at home and grow their own, and that's great. But I just don't think that everybody's going to abandon the legal industry because of the financial challenges of big public companies, although that's all you see in the news. So there's a couple big companies that are flourishing, they're doing great, but you don't hear about that because that's not clickbait, right? That's not attractive. It's not, Aurora and Canopy, they both have lost tons of cash. They've blown through the cash. They're running out of runway, and that's all we hear about in the news. You don't hear about small and medium co that's doing well and making great products. So yeah, again, it's like legal weed has been a a blessing because we're no longer going to jail for it, but it's also been a curse because it's been a challenge to get great quality products to market. But that's all. It's all coming to fruition now. It's happening. So I'm excited for the future, and I'm excited to have you as a partner, right, Blue? Because like, we're going to bring back some of that old school stuff, and then we're going to hybridize some of that old school stuff with some new school stuff, and make some new varieties that no one has ever seen before that have amazing effect and agronomic value.
Well, that's exactly right, man. And yeah, I really appreciate having met you and working with you.
Cool.
Yeah,
Likewise.
I've found cool people in the industry, few and far between, and most of them have been. Most of the cool guys have been in Canada. That's definitely noticeable. But yeah, you know, a lot of the things we've been talking about in this episode, I reckon you, Jeff, and other people listening, if they haven't heard our last episode with Medman and these kind of topics we talked about, like he's like on the same page as us with a lot of things. He's a cool guy. And it was a good episode with Trent. But I would definitely like to thank you for coming on, Jeff. And would you come on again, not only when you've grown a bit more of my genetics, but like, because you are so knowledgeable across like everything to do with cannabis, really. Like maybe if people had questions they could put to you, or
totally.
maybe you had a spare hour once a month or something, like as a regular guest, giving all the info and knowledge you've got, it'd be fucking awesome.
Totally. I'm totally into that for sure. And yeah, if people want to check me out online, I'm Greenhouse Advisor on Instagram. And yeah, I mean, I post a lot of my.
And what about for professional inquiries? Because you are like an asset to any operation. Have you got an email?
Yeah, Jeff at legitexotics.ca is my best email for business stuff.
Jeff at legitexotics.ca.
You bet.
Cool.
Right on.
All right, man. Thank you so much, Jeff. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
I've got to go
Thanks,
now
guys.
because my little dog's downstairs and he's.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, and please come again, man. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Be well, and we'll be in touch. I appreciate you.